right, welcome to the Questionable Calls podcast. It is Wednesday evening, a little bit after 7 p.m. Eastern time. It's good to be on, Clark. Some wild NFL playoff results. I thought this weekend would be pretty boring, and it ended up there were some bad games, but the bad games were surprising. So, I mean, to me, my opening thoughts. I mean, look, Clark, I just think, just the reaction to the Cowboys losing. I mean, just the way that game went. I just want to go through it emotionally. Like, I mean, I'd love to say I feel bad for Cowboys fans, but that's really difficult to do. So I mean, I'm watching the game and I'm thinking, you know what, Green Bay might have a chance, because I thought, the way that the game was talked about, like I thought Green Bay's offense had a chance to do some damage because I've thought Dallas's defense was overrated the entire season. And, especially when you see all these teams run the ball on them, Miami ran the ball on them really well. And you've seen the good offenses have really done a lot of damage against them. But, also the Cowboys were at home and they had been really dominant at home. So, they go down the field and score, and I'm thinking, okay, Green Bay is going to make this a game. And then the thing just snowballed and got just ridiculously out of hand. And then I know, like I heard this on the Dan Patrick show trying to make the argument, well, it kind of got close at the end there. No, it didn't. The game was over. It was 48 to 16 with 6 minutes to go, guys. The game was over. Yeah, I know Dallas racked up some scores at the end and whatever. Dak ended up having 400 yards, but come on, guys. That was done. There was zero chance that the Cowboys were going to come back in that game. But yeah, Clark, I just couldn't believe it. And then it just became humorous. Like all the stuff that we say about the Cowboys, Clark, it's like encapsulated in that game. The entire regular season, it's like we should do there's like the levels of Cowboys. It's just like they're telling us they're going to win the Super Bowl. They're real contenders this year, and things come down, and then you look at the record, and it's like, okay, but you're not beating anybody. And we know this from personal experience being Dolphins fans. We know what it's like to watch our team not be able to beat anyone and everyone be like, oh, they're awesome. So you and I never believed. You like emphatically were like, Dallas is not going to the NFC Championship game. And when they got the 2 seed, I thought, you know what? I don't think they're going to win the Super Bowl, but could they win 2 home games? Maybe. The win against Detroit is a complete debacle. Dallas should not have won that game. I know that everyone's like, well, you can't blame the refs. Well, in this one case, the refs did mess this up. Otherwise, Detroit had basically won the game. But yeah, it just went to comical. And then when Dak threw the pick 6, you and I were on the phone, and I was just like, I can't believe this. So. We feel I don't quite feel your pain, Cowboys fans, because the Dolphins don't have those kind of expectations, and they probably never will. But that was quite a performance. Just shitting the bed.
Well, it's kind of, honestly, I started thinking about it. It's starting to become a tradition now. You get toward either the end of the regular season or end of the regular season into the postseason. You just watch Dallas just go out and just, lay an egg at some point. When it was Romo, sometimes it would be toward the end of the season and it would cause them to miss the playoffs. Or he'd go to the playoffs and lay an egg, And now it's been Dak. The last time that I actually kind of believed in the Cowboys was that year where they lost to Green Bay in the divisional round. Remember the year when Des Bryant had he almost had that catch? Like it was a 4th and 1 or something. And Romo threw it down the field. And if Des Bryant makes that play, who knows? Maybe they beat the Packers and then they would have had to go to Seattle. Maybe they could have made the Super Bowl that year. Like that might have been the only time where I was like, okay, I think I kind of believe in this because they had the best offensive line in the league. They could run the ball really well. Des Bryant was in his prime. But it's just kind of become a tradition now. I got to be honest, as every year passes, it just becomes funnier and funnier and funnier. Because everybody, and the thing is, it wouldn't be so funny if they weren't the Cowboys, right? If this was some other team that did this, right? But because it's Dallas and they get all this media attention, and like throughout the year, fans keep trying to tell you like, oh, they're going to be really good. This is their year. They're getting better, and media personalities like Nick Wright are just like, oh, they're going to the Super Bowl this year. This is the best team they've had in 25 years. And, just so they build you up, and then it's just so fun when they just come crashing down. I mean, it's like you can't make this stuff up. I mean, when they played San Francisco last year, the game was like relatively close, but it's just like you're just watching Dallas. Like they got no shot. They can't score. Like Dak is just playing like complete shit. He's just throwing interceptions. And then 2 years before, a couple years ago when they played San Francisco, and they it's so funny to me. Everyone looking back, they talk about the running play, and they couldn't stop the clock to get one more play off, as if that was the difference in the game. Guys, they played like shit the whole game, and then Garoppolo threw a bad interception, and then they sort of came back, and everybody forgets that it's like even if they had been able to get one more play off, they would have had to try to throw a touchdown pass from the 30-yard line. Like, yeah, fat chance of that working.
And San Francisco, remember, they had a fourth down, and they snapped the ball, and the offensive lineman was moving. Otherwise, they would have had the first down, and the game would have been over anyway. So
right.
but yeah, it just boggles the mind, and I don't understand the sports media falls for it every year. Like
Yeah.
I don't get it, and the thing is, like I don't even think they really believe it because. As an example, Skip Bayless, completely in on the Cowboys. As soon as they're down 27-0, he's like, Dak Prescott was never good. He's a 4th-round pick. We should have known anyway. McCarthy's a joke. This team's a joke. It's like, well, wait a minute. You told me the whole season how awesome they were. You can't be off of them because they, lose one game. So I don't even know that these people that are saying it really believe it because it doesn't make sense. Why? It makes no sense. Like, look at the history. Why would the team that you're like, I'm gonna put my opinion down? Because in the sports media, opinions are currency. That's what the currency is, right? Why would I put all my chips on that? I just don't understand that. I'd pick any other team before I pick the Cowboys. If I'm gonna be judged on this opinion, then the last team I would ever pick would be the Cowboys. So it just cracks me up, and
yeah. I did want to just mention a few things as I've been, because we've had a few days to digest the game, and I've watched some different analysis of some things. Dan Quinn, this idea that he's this really, high-profile head coaching candidate now. What the hell was that? I mean, it looked like they were just, the receivers being wide open, and basically the Cowboys defense was unable to deal with motion. Dan Orlovsky talked about this a bunch, like right after the game or the next day, I think. And it's just like they just seem to have a lot of trouble with Kyle Shanahan style offenses. And it's like, well, that seems to be a huge problem if you're in the NFC dealing with, the Packers and the 49ers and the Rams. Like, is Ben Johnson on the Shanahan coaching tree or no? I don't think he is. No,
I don't think so.
Okay. But I just find that funny that you guys weren't prepared to deal with that. And then the other thing is, it seems like McCarthy they're just running the West Coast offense. And it's not very, there's not a lot of misdirection or deception involved, like on some of these plays. And so I think it becomes easier for some defenses to figure it out. Like on that pick six, they basically had two in-breaking routes right next to each other. And so whoever picked it off, I don't remember who it was, he's watching Dak the whole time, and he sees, just before the receiver starts to break, he sees Dak, like, the hands separate, the ball's going to come out, says, oh, okay, jumps the route, grabs the ball, runs it into the end zone, And so it just kind of like, you don't really have that inventive of an offense. It's just all the problems, like you were saying, all the problems with the Cowboys, they all rose to the surface, right in that game. It's just, it's hilarious to me.
Yeah, no, it just cracked me up the whole season because before the season, Clark, we're assessing this, and my assessment, I think you agree, was they have one receiver. Like, you've got one receiver. Okay, he's really good. He had an unbelievable year, right? It's very similar to the Dolphins. The Dolphins basically, they have other good receivers, but the Dolphins basically throw to one guy for the most part. So that can be taken away. The Cowboys can't run the ball. Like, they came into this season like, we're just going to use Tony Pollard, and that's it. And it's like, okay, that's not going to work. In the NFL today, you need 2 or 3 running backs.
Yep.
And, they need to be able to do different stuff because you've got to be able to. That's the only. Nobody's running the ball 20 to 25 times anymore because they just get hurt. So you can't. So it's like you can't run the ball. Your offensive line is old, right? The games where Tyron Smith was out, the games where uh, Martin was out, like they weren't great on the offensive line. So it's like now you're asking, like, you can't run the ball. You're asking Dak to go out there and just beat people, and that's never been what he's good at. Like that's not what Dak. It's not what Dak does. He's not the kind of guy where it's just like, all right, you take the ball and you go deliver for us. He's never been that guy. So
Yeah.
and then the defense, like Dan Quinn in Seattle, basically what he was doing when Seattle had the Legion of Boom teams, they were so talented, like you could just run the same scheme every play. It didn't matter.
Right.
They were just loaded. So it's fine. You didn't have to be multiple and do a bunch of things. But so the Cowboys are like, we're just going to play cover 2 in the back and we're going to play man. And it's like, if you do that against Shanahan, you're dead. Like, they'll take advantage of you all day. So then in this game, they try to switch to, all right, we're going to play zone, but they don't know how to play zone. So it it's just one of those things. I'm watching Jordan Love just rip them a new asshole. It's just like, you guys got to step up to the plate. And I will say this, the teams that make the playoffs where it's just like, this is what we do, they tend to lose.
Yeah.
You have to be so innovative and ahead of the curve now. And I think I was looking at it, the teams that are either Shanahan, McVay, or Andy Reid, like that coaching tree is like 10 to 12 teams.
Okay.
Right. And so you basically, like, the way the NFL works now, you got to have one of those guys or you got no shot. So I think it's I think Dak played terrible in that game. The offense was terrible. Like I do feel like I don't feel like that's legitimate. I think their offense would have normally played better. I think if you played that game 10 times, their offense would have played a lot better. The defense, to me, I just thought their defense was overrated the whole time, and that got exposed. So I wanted to talk
about a playmaking defense. They try to make
right.
plays, and when it doesn't work, you can look really bad. Deron Bland, he's got all those pick sixes. Yeah, because he's taking chances on stuff, and when that doesn't work, it's going to look really bad.
Right. It's one of those defenses, they have to have a negative play to beat the other team. If they don't have negative plays, they're in trouble.
Yeah.
And then people blaming, like I heard people blaming Micah Parsons, like, oh man, why didn't you get more pressure on the quarterback? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, first of all, if you watch the game, there were several big throws Jordan Love made where he was getting hit right after he threw. So
yeah.
I don't believe this thing that, well, they couldn't get any pressure on him. I don't agree with that. That's not number one. And number two, if it's one guy and you just got to make sure you block that one guy, it can be done. You can get around it. And Green Bay's smart enough. The other thing is, this is a thing that I heard from Mike Lombardi. When LaFleur has played a team before, he knows what to do. And he's played against Dan Quinn a lot. So he knows what he has to do against him. So
he was on the coaching staff in Atlanta,
right,
with Shanahan when Quinn was the head coach. So
yeah. So he knows it backwards and forwards. But I wanted to talk about next, Clark, the Philadelphia Eagles. Speaking of disastrous games, the Cowboys. I'll put it this way, Clark. The Cowboys were trying, like they were playing hard. Like it wasn't an effort thing. Philadelphia didn't want to be there. Like that was as poor a display in a playoff game that I've seen. I can't remember the last time. That was utter just joke. I don't know what they were. It felt like they couldn't do anything on defense. If Tampa could catch the ball, that game would have been even worse than it was. And as it was, Tampa was basically in control of the game, and you never felt like Philadelphia was going to be able to do anything. And so, yeah, I think like that's. Before this weekend, Clark, like I wasn't seriously thinking, oh, geez, McCarthy could be in trouble and Nick Sirianni could be in trouble. I mean, good Lord, these are not the results that I was expecting. Now, the Cowboys to lose is one thing, but get destroyed at home.
Yeah.
And for Philadelphia to go to Tampa and just have no shot from the first quarter on.
Their defense was horrible. I mean, guys were wide open. I mean, not to take anything away from Baker Mayfield, but I mean, there were plays that got left on the field because I think Mike Evans dropped a couple passes. I mean, there were stuff in the middle of the field that was just wide open. I mean, that just looked like either they're not trying or they changed defensive coordinators essentially in the middle of the year. And I think guys just didn't know where they were supposed to be, or they weren't trying to figure out where they were supposed to be. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Philadelphia went from, okay, they've got problems to, oh boy, I don't know about this team, to, oh my God, they're terrible.
Yeah.
I've never seen a team go in 7 games go from, wow, they might be they're not as good as last year, but I think they're still pretty good, to just, they can't. I mean, I don't think they could beat anybody in the NFL next week. If they were playing next week, I just don't, I don't think they can win a game right now. And that's ridiculous considering how much talent they have. Like,
Yeah.
for a team that's that talented, especially their defensive line's awesome, their offensive weapons are unbelievable, their offensive line's really good. For that team, so here's my question, Clark. So which is worse? Which was worse, the Cowboys' performance or the Eagles' performance?
That's a tough one. I mean, yeah, like you said, because here's the deal. Throughout the season, it's not like we thought the Cowboys were like falling apart or we questioned their effort or whatever else. I mean, you can question play calling, or maybe they don't have enough talent in certain areas of their team, but they have some weaknesses, or Dak will, sometimes play poorly, or Dak will play poorly against good teams. But Philadelphia, I mean, really, it's kind of funny we're all considering this a late season collapse. This was a slow, like, decline over the course of the entire season. We saw signs of this where they were just coming into these games, and it's just like they were flirting with disaster all year long. They're just fucking around, and they found different ways to win. But some of these games, they should have lost to Buffalo. They
Yep.
probably should have lost to Dallas the first time. I mean,
Yep.
they almost tried to hand Dallas the game. So, they lost to the Jets. I remember that, that's embarrassing. At least the Dolphins have that over them. The Dolphins didn't lose to the freaking Jets. Um, Jalen Hurts seemed like he was battling injuries all year, and they clearly were not right. A.J. Brown, who I guess does get into stuff on the sidelines, that's just kind of his thing. But, I mean, this year it seemed really bad, like he was really unhappy about the offense. You can just tell, it's clear they really like what the coordinators they had last year really made a difference on this team, and they just, whoever they hired to replace them, just they could not recapture anything close to what they had going last year. And I thought, it was funny to me. I think I saw some people mention this, and I thought this like when I was watching the playoff game, when they scored to make it 16-9, and then they decided to go for 2 because there was a penalty, and so then it was 4. They could go for 2 from the 1-yard line, and they of course did. The brotherly shove, which always works. And not only does it work, they gain like 2 or 3 yards, not just 1 yard. And this time the Buccaneers stuffed them, and I was kind of like, I don't want to like be a little too mystical with things or sound too much like Skip Bayless, but I felt like that was sort of symbolic. It's like the one thing you guys have over everybody else that you're supposed to be able to do really well, and you couldn't do it. It's like, wow, you guys they got some serious problems. I don't know what the hell is going on. I don't know if I heard some people mention maybe there's something in the locker room that we don't know about. I think obviously the coordinators have something to do with it. And then you just got to question, like, do they need to get rid of Sirianni? Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's going on in that locker room, but it's kind of like, what is he doing? Because, and a bunch of people, like John Nokoff keeps mentioning this, he doesn't call plays. So you're supposed to set the culture. Well, apparently the culture completely fell apart. So what are you doing? Like, what have you been doing all week? Like during the course of the season. So yeah, I think the Eagles is most definitely worse. The Cowboys, part of the reason it's not worse is because we just expect this. But the Eagles, they just made the Super Bowl last year. And the Eagles, they did manage to get to 10-1. So we just figured they'll figure things out, but clearly they didn't.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, back to the Cowboys, it's amazing, like, Clark, they always deliver. Like, it's amazing how they do this. It's every freaking year. It's just like they know how to do it. Like, they do it better than anybody else. Like, it's really impressive. I mean, I know that's not what the Cowboys want to hear, but God damn! I mean, how do you pull this off? It's incredible. I'm watching you get the 2 seed. You're playing against Green Bay, who's the youngest team in the league. You know, so yeah, just amazing.
Well,
Um,
well, let me close on this. I just want to make one more point. So,
yep.
I do think that, with the Cowboys, we just have to kind of understand that Jerry Jones is not running things the way that they should be run. He's got him and his son are basically like the GM. No one was itching to hire Mike McCarthy. And some of the decisions they make with their roster, like you should have gotten another running back. Like, what are you doing? Why the hell did they pay Ezekiel Elliott all that money? They finally got rid of him.
Well, let's just hold on that for a
Yeah.
minute. Let's talk about the Dolphins first, and then
Oh, okay.
let's
We'll go
talk
to
about
offseason stuff. All right.
I wanted to talk about the quarterback play and how much of a you're seeing how much of a difference it's making, and then we'll talk about coaching after that.
Okay. All right.
We'll
Sounds
do all
good.
the coaching. We'll do all the coaching stuff in one shot. All right. So the Dolphins lost to the Chiefs, which anybody who watches this podcast, we could have told you that was going to happen. Like we expected it. As soon as honestly, Clark, as soon as the Dolphins lost to Tennessee, I was looking at, this is what's coming. The Dolphins are going to play a road game in the playoffs and they're going to lose. Like it was
Yeah.
just kind of like, all right, here it comes. Be ready because here it comes, and that's exactly what happened. But I want to address this, and this is something I keep hearing, and it bothers me. Well, the cold weather. I mean, the Dolphins can't play in cold weather. I mean, you can't expect. What did you think you were going to get? Like, it's just they can't. Tua can't play in cold weather. Blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, that's fine. The cold weather does make a difference. I'm not saying it doesn't, but if you've watched the last 4 or 5 Dolphins games, they've pretty much looked like that. Like, now they may have been worse against Kansas City, but this is how the Dolphins have been playing for the last 4 or 5 games. So I don't understand where people are going with this. It has nothing to do with the weather. Okay. It is very simple. The Dolphins can't beat good teams. Okay. Anytime Tua plays against a good team, he's bad. Like, it's not like, oh, well, no, they couldn't do it against Tennessee. They couldn't do it against Baltimore. They couldn't do it against Buffalo, and they lost to Kansas City again. So, it has nothing to do with the cold weather. Okay. Yes, the Dolphins' game plan was conservative. You know why? Because they know who their quarterback is. Like, Mike McDaniel knows, I can't ask this guy to be making all these crazy throws. We have to manage this game for him, and that's what it's going to take. So, I thought the only chance I thought the Dolphins had, Clark, was, and that's the crazy part, Clark. I thought the worse the weather got, the better chance the Dolphins had, because if the only way they were going to win is if some crazy stuff happened. They got some fumbles and the ball's bouncing around, tip passes. I thought, that's the only way that they're going to win this game. If they play Kansas City straight up, they're not beating them. And that's pretty much what happened. There really weren't very many turnovers in the game. And so it wasn't this wild, crazy, low scoring, whatever. It was just really cold. And so in that case, Miami had no shot. So I just, the other thing I wanted to address was the Chiefs. This Chiefs getting this boost of, oh, look, the Chiefs are back. The Chiefs are really good. They had 400 yards of offense, blah, blah, blah. And it just cracked me up because, like, half the Dolphins' defense was out. Like,
Yeah.
they literally had no pass rush. The only way they got anywhere near the quarterback was to blitz, which left guys open. So Mahomes was like, okay, you want to blitz? Great. So those are my thoughts on the game. What do you have to say?
So, I mean, look, as far as why the game went the way it did, I mean, look, the cold was a factor. I'm not going to say that it wasn't. I definitely think that, I mean, the main reason it's a factor is because Mahomes has the arm strength to throw through the cold and the wind and all that stuff, and Tua doesn't, And also, I just kind of feel like if you're on the road and you're losing and you're just really struggling on offense, I just feel like the cold weather is just going to make it worse because it's just going to be like you feel like crap. You can't feel your hands, you can't feel your feet. It's just brutal out there, and you just can't get anything going on offense. Patrick Mahomes made plays. He made some plays with his legs. And then, look, I mean, if I'm forced to pick one, I'll blame the Dolphins offense for the loss. But I mean, look, their defense was a fact. The Dolphins' defense was a factor in terms of all those injuries because the Chiefs, their two tackles, have not been playing that well this year. And if the Dolphins had some pass rushers, they might have been able to expose that, and that might have given them a shot. They probably still would have lost because the offense still wouldn't have been able to do anything. But I do think that's important to point out. And look, the offense. I mean, they struggled on third down. They got some penalties at the wrong times. Tua was off on some throws that were behind the line of scrimmage. And, I mean, you could tell they ran the ball a little bit, but I think the Chiefs kind of figured out how they were going to run the ball, which, I mean, if you can't figure that out by now, I mean, they're going to run off the tackle and they're going to try to cut back at some point. Like the Chiefs knew that, and they ran a little bit, but then they got behind, so then they had to throw more, and obviously that was a problem because Tua couldn't really do it. The interception early in the game was, I could call it a terrible interception, but at this point, I just expect it. I mean, basically, Tua got a little bit of pressure, and the ball sailed on him. Because once you get a little bit of pressure on him, and you get his mechanics a little bit off, the ball's not going to go where he wants it to go. So, yeah, it was. It wasn't, I mean, I guess it was somewhat of a disappointing game. It was a little bit eye-opening, but it was also just sort of confirmation of what we've already been talking about and what we've seen, and everyone's going to focus on the cold weather. And look, that is a factor. I definitely think that's a factor moving forward. If he's going to have to play games in cold weather, like, you really don't like it. I sort of knew that beforehand anyway, but yeah, that's a problem. But I just think the bigger problem is that, and we can, if we want to transition to talking about Tua, we can get into that. But I mean, obviously, the bigger problem is just Tua's limitations.
Yeah, I just so let's just talk about it from this standpoint. The Dolphins going forward.
Okay.
Look, I think that I know that they created all this optimism, by beating the Dolphins. Beat all these bad teams this year. They couldn't beat anybody good, and they really didn't play well against any good teams, really. So, I know that it's a downer to say this, but I mean, Clark, it's a coin flip that this is going to get better. Like,
Well,
this is
let me just interject something real quick.
yep.
So I totally agree with you, and I forgot what I was going to say. Continue. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I think that yeah, I think there's a better than 50% chance that this is not going to get better. This is probably the best that it's going to get because you're still taking you this season, especially the first 2 months, you were still taking teams by surprise. You were still getting the
Right.
jump on them. And that's going to end in this year. Like it took almost till the last month of the season last year for teams to catch up. They caught up after about 6 weeks this year. So I don't understand where you go from here and how you can make the argument. All right, let's sign up to a 4 or 5 year deal, and
Right.
he's our guy, and we're gonna win with him. Now I understand. All right, well you have to find a quarterback then. I get that, and I
Yeah.
do, and I'm not against Tua coming back for next season, but I just think the bottom line to me is this: the potential of this offense with Tyreek Hill, with Waddle, okay, is really high. Okay. But you're never going to reach that potential with this quarterback. You're just not. There's certain things he can do, and there's a whole lot of stuff he can't do. Right. So, people watch this game and they're like, well, he's got some limitations. No, he has huge, gigantic, major limitations. Okay. These are severe talent deficiencies when you're playing quarterback in the NFL. Okay. It's not a knock on Tua. These are just facts. And anybody who's paying attention could see all of this in college. Nothing he's doing is like surprising, should be surprising anybody. So
Yeah.
I just think the bottom line is, all right, you want to keep going to the playoffs, and maybe now listen, maybe if things would have broken the right way for the Dolphins and they'd have gotten a home game against Pittsburgh, maybe they could have won a playoff game. But that's about it. So you're never going to get there with this. And McDaniel knows it. The Dolphins front office knows it. So how long are you going to go on with this?
Right. Well, so I think I just remembered what I wanted to say. So when we were talking about him, they can't beat good teams. Okay. Let's focus on the process instead of the result. I'm not saying that he has to beat every good team he plays. Of course, I'm not saying that. We're not saying that. But forget the result of the game. Look at how they played in those games. That's the bigger concern, right? If they'd have lost some close games, I'd be like, all right, let's keep this moving and we'll see if you can get better at it or whatever. But some of these games, it's just like, they're like, oh, well, it was kind of close, and it's like, no, it really wasn't close. Like the Eagles game, we're like, oh, well, it was kind of close for a while. Yeah, but they just, once the Eagles sort of put the hammer down, they were done. And they're like, oh, they almost beat the Chiefs. They got down 21-0 early in the season. I'm talking about not the playoff game. Early in the season, they got down 21-0. And then they have a drive to try to go down there and maybe tie the game, and Tua fucks it up. They played the Bills. They got their asses kicked in the first game, the first time. The second time they played them in the last week of the season, I mean, they could only score 14 points. I mean, literally, they probably had a chance to put them away, and they couldn't do it. And then, I mean, you look at the Ravens game, obviously, they got their asses kicked in that game. The Titans game, I mean, that was almost for the season right there. He had the ball with 1:45 left. Just go down, kick a field goal, win the game. And he couldn't do it. They were up 14. The defense should have played better, but they were up 14 points. I mean, you couldn't score a little bit more. That would have won the game. And then maybe the Dolphins would have, they would have had a home playoff game. Maybe they would have won it, maybe not, whatever. But it just seems to me that you got to look at the process of it. And yeah, like you were saying, I keep hearing this stuff from people like, oh, well, he's got some limitations. It's like, no, guys, these are gigantic flaws that that have been exploited, and they will continue to be exploited. And the other thing you got to look at is, I don't think a lot of people are talking about this. Maybe some local Dolphins media is talking about this, but Chris Greer really went all in these past 2 years. Okay, in terms of they traded for Tyreek Hill, they traded for Bradley Chubb. I mean, I know they wasted like a 7th-round pick on Chase Claypool this year, but whatever. There may be some other trades in there, but I mean, a lot of them are like free agent signings, like Jalen Ramsey. Actually, that was a trade, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that was a trade. Teron Armstead was a free agent signing, but he's older and he's constantly getting hurt, so I don't know how much longer he has. They have a bunch of free agents this year. And then the other thing that people no one's really saying this, it's like, and I've been kind of saying this, how much longer do you think Tyreek Hill's going to be playing at an elite level? I mean, I've heard him talk about this. He doesn't necessarily want to play forever, and he's already put up like a Hall of Fame career. He's already won a Super Bowl. He had 2 years in a row of 1,700 receiving yards with Tua as his quarterback. I mean, he's going to go into the Hall of Fame. So if he has other interests outside of football, he could retire or he could just go somewhere else because the Dolphins can't afford to keep him anymore. And we've seen Tua without Tyreek Hill. So how much longer do you think this is going to last? And also, people are like, well, this year, and you mentioned this, but when we were talking about this earlier this week, well, he stayed healthy all year long. You think he's just going to do that from now on? You just think he's never going to get hurt? And then the point you made about them, defenses catching on. Look, maybe going forward in the first few games of the season, McDaniel can add some wrinkles to the offense that bad teams struggle to figure out, and that can get him some games. But guys, here's the main thing that I was thinking this week is, look, some fans will be like, well, what do you want? They made the playoffs 2 years in a row. It's like, yeah, but guys, I just want to have a fighting chance to make a deep playoff run and possibly get to the Super Bowl. Okay? And there's several teams in the league that they have a quarterback who they feel like they have a fighting chance. Mahomes, obviously, because he's already won the Super Bowl. Joe Burrow, Josh Allen. You can make an argument for Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson. I'm trying to think of who else. There's probably a couple more that I may not be thinking of. But there's other quarterbacks who have way more talent, and you feel like if we can get things right around them, we could potentially 1 year really make a run. And the thing is, it's like with the Dolphins, things did go right this year. The Bills were fucking around all year long. The Dolphins got out to this huge lead. Tua didn't get hurt. The defense was starting to play better, and they still fucked it up.
They had one of the easiest
going anywhere because of the defense, the injuries on defense, but still.
They had one of the easiest schedules in the league.
Yep.
And so yeah, it's much more likely this year was the outlier, and every other year is going to be worse. So, but yeah, I think that look now, the reality is we can say whatever we want, right? The Dolphins are going because the problem is Tua's entire contract next year is guaranteed. And if they don't sign an extension and try to get the cap number down, then the entire contract is going to count against the cap next year, and the Dolphins don't have the room for that. So he's going to get signed to a contract, most likely. And
Chris
this
Greer
is
already said in a press conference, he said, our intention is to keep Tua here long term.
right.
So,
Right. So what I would say to Dolphins fans is, how is this any different than when we had Ryan Tannehill who would make the playoffs every now and then? It just looks more fun because we have Tyreek Hill, right? It's more
yeah.
exciting, right? We're not trying to win games 17-13 anymore, but it's not any better. And so that's the only thing I would say is, like, I'm not trying to be a downer. I'm just trying to point out to the Dolphins fans, this isn't any better than it's been for the last 25 years. It's basically the same thing. The difference, what I would say is, I think we have the right coach. For the first time, I think we actually have the right coach who can get stuff done. And the Dolphins are going through a similar situation what the 49ers went through with Jimmy Garoppolo, where it's like, okay, he can do these things, and these things can get us pretty far. But we've got to upgrade the quarterback. And the Dolphins don't have as good a roster as the 49ers do, so they're not going to go as far. That's
Well,
just
and the
what it
other thing, yeah, the other thing is, we were talking about this yesterday. Where's the history of the Dolphins drafting and developing really good players? I don't really see it, and that's the only way forward because, like I said, that their cap is kind of a mess right now in terms of, because they really went all in these last 2 years. So, and when you do that, the bill comes due eventually, and that can really make things difficult. So the only way out of that is you got to draft and develop really good players. And Chris Greer, remember when the offensive line was absolutely terrible? Yeah, he drafted all those guys. So I just don't really have a lot of hope for this. I mean, the offensive line needs to be better, but I don't know that they're going to be able to draft offensive linemen to help out. Teron Armstead, who knows how much longer he's got. So, I mean, people think that, well, they made the playoffs 2 years in a row, so that means they're just going to keep making the playoffs every year. That's not how it works. Okay? Elite quarterbacks do that. Elite
perfect.
quarterbacks or teams with really elite rosters can make the playoffs year after year after year. When you don't have an elite quarterback, if some things go wrong during the year in terms of injuries or people aren't playing as well as you thought or your schedule is really tough, good luck making the playoffs, especially in the AFC.
Yeah, that segues perfectly into what I wanted to talk about, Clark, is that, you're watching these quarterbacks this weekend, and I don't understand how you can watch all these quarterbacks play and then try to tell me two is the answer. I don't understand. Like, to me, Clark, it's turning into, I mean, the level of play is not deteriorating or anything, but it's kind of turning into college football, Clark, where there's a big divide now in the NFL between the haves and the have-nots. And the teams playing in the playoffs, and the problem is now 14 teams are making the playoffs, Clark. So you're getting 2, 3, maybe 4 teams that are basically have nots in the postseason. You're getting teams
Right.
quarterbacked by Mason Rudolph, and so you're going to get a couple of those every year now. And the thing is, in the NFL now, but the way that the rules are and the way that the game has been slanted so much towards the quarterback, it's too much of an advantage to overcome when a quarterback like Tua Tagovailoa or Mason Rudolph or one of these guys, Kirk Cousins, goes up against one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, you're at such a huge disadvantage. You basically have very little chance, and you're definitely not going to win multiple playoff games when you have a severe quarterback disadvantage. So,
Yeah. Well, let's just go through the quarterbacks really quick, just to tell people this, like, of the quarterbacks that played this past weekend. Okay, Jordan Love, way more talented than Tua. You see him throw off his back foot, he's just ripping the ball down the field. You see how well he moves. You see how tall he is. Matt Stafford and Jared Goff, they're both more talented than Tua. Jared Goff, I mean, both those guys don't really move, but Tua can't throw the ball the way Matthew Stafford can. He can't throw the ball the way Jared Goff can. He's not as tall as them either. CJ Stroud, I mean, he's just coming into his own. I mean, the way he moves around, the way he throws, how easy it looks when he throws the ball, and he can just fling the ball down the field. Um, Hell, Dak Prescott, and again, I'm not the biggest Dak Prescott fan, but I mean, he can move around. He's tall. He can throw the ball, but he seems to throw the ball a little better than Tua does. And then I'm trying to who else played? I mean, Josh Allen. I mean, do we even need to talk about that? He can just run people over. He's got a huge arm. He can throw the ball wherever he wants to. Mahomes. I mean, he can run really fast. He can throw the ball all over the place. He can throw from multiple arm angles. You know, I'm probably trying to think of what other quarterbacks played, but yeah. I mean, it's just yeah. It's just a huge disadvantage when these guys other guys have so much more physical talent than your quarterback does.
Yeah, you can't. This is the NFL the way it is in 2024. I just don't believe if you don't have a guy, you're not going to win playoff games. It's just the way it is. And like where I was going down the quarterbacks in the AFC, and I mean, Tua is basically 9th or 10th in the AFC. Like, so almost every playoff game he plays in, the other quarterback's going to be better.
Yeah.
So you just can't. There's just certain things you can't overcome. I do believe McDaniel is squeezing every drop he can get out of this. And that's the other part that I think people don't understand. It's like, oh, this is really what Tua Tagovailoa is going to be. This is what he is. What he is with McDaniel. It's like, guys, after his first 2 years, he was going to be out of the league. That's what was going to happen. He was on his way out. And then McDaniel and Tyreek Hill show up and basically save his career. So, no disrespect to them, they've done a hell of a job. But yeah, these guys are, when you're watching CJ Stroud throw the ball, I mean, it just there's nothing defensive coordinators can do. He's just like, all right, well, I'll just go here, and the ball's right on the money, right where it's supposed to be. And like you said, yeah, when you're 6'3", it's a hell of a lot easier. They're just throws that those guys are able to make and get to that a shorter quarterback is just never gonna happen for him.
Yeah, and then I guess just last thing I'll say is just look, they're going to sign him to a contract, and look, guys, what you're essentially signing up for is 3 to 4 years of probably mediocrity. I mean, somewhere between 7 and 11 wins. Probably, depending on the schedule.
Like I said, the way the Dolphins have been for the last 25 years, right? They win between 7 and 11 games. Maybe they make the playoffs, maybe they don't, but they probably aren't going to win a playoff game. That's what it is. That's where we are. So, but what's going to happen is, Clark, they're going to sign Tua to an extension. They're going to push all the money back to the end of it, right? So they'll be able to keep this together for the next 2 or 3 years if they want to. But what's going to happen is, like you said, the bill will come due, and when it does, you'll be looking for another quarterback. So,
yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I thought that I thought for Jordan. I mean, what a coming out party for Jordan Love. I mean, that was spectacular. That was as good a performance, especially in a first playoff game, as I've probably ever seen. I mean, he had full control of what was going on. Even when they rushed him, it didn't matter. Like, so I think Green Bay's in good shape. And, it cracks me up that everybody, nobody has any patience. They all want to jump the gun on everything. Jordan Love played 4 or 5 games. Everybody's like, oh, this guy, yeah, forget it. He's done, whatever. Even like a couple of weeks ago on Colin Cowherd's show, Jason McIntyre's like, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not buying it. This guy's whatever. So it's just like everybody had made up their mind. And I'm just like, listen, I understand we can't give quarterbacks 3 or 4 years anymore. I get that. But can we give him 1? Like, could we just let the guy improve a little bit? He hasn't played.
Well, you guys gave Tua 4 years to apparently figure everything out. So, you can't give the guy 1 year.
Yeah, give it a little bit of time. All right, so let's talk about the coaching carousel. So, Clark, I find it hysterical to me that people are talking about who the Cowboys and the Eagles should hire, and they still have head coaches. So, we're not even we're not talking about the teams that actually have openings. We're only talking about the teams that we think should have openings. So that makes me laugh. Number one, I think that the whole Cowboys thing just kind of, first of all, I think it's ridiculous to be like, oh, that's it, McCarthy's got to go, even though they've won 12 games 3 years in a row. Nobody, the thing that people miss, and no one's bringing this up. Every time it gets brought up about the Cowboys, Cowboys should hire Belichick, Cowboys should do this, Cowboys should, people are acting like, oh, it's done, they're definitely going to fire him. Nobody's bringing up the fact that Jerry Jones doesn't fire people. Okay? He had Jason Garrett there for 8 years. Everybody wanted him fired from the first year on. Every year it was, oh, they got to fire him. Got to go, got to get out of here, whatever. And they never did. Right? People wanted McCarthy fired after his first year. They wanted him fired the whole time. Still hasn't fired him. So why is nobody bringing up the fact that Jerry Jones is loyal to a fault? The other thing is, not only is it loyalty, Clark, it's I picked that guy. He's my guy. So I'm going to make this guy, he's going to be awesome, and everybody's going to give me credit for it. And that's what it is. And so the ego and the loyalty thing, where it's just like, I'm sorry. I don't think they're going to fire him. I think it's probably 75% they keep him. And so I just think it's absolutely ridiculous that people can't grab. You're not going to look at past history of what the Cowboys do. You're not going to pay attention to that at all. You'll be like, oh no, that performance was terrible. He's got to go. What's the deal?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably more likely that the Eagles would move on from their coach than the Cowboys because, yeah, Jerry Jones is kind of loyal to a fault. And I don't know. We'll get on to Belichick, eventually. But, yeah, I don't. It's just that's one of the problems with the Cowboys, because Jerry Jones just has this way of running the team where it's like, well, I want to win my way, and he's basically been trying to do this ever since they got rid of Jimmy Johnson. And Barry Switzer was able to win one Super Bowl with Jimmy Johnson's roster. And then ever since then, he's been trying to do it himself, and it just doesn't work. Because even if the Cowboys had played a better game, say they'd gotten past this game, they would have lost either the next week or in the NFC Championship game. Because there's a lot of flaws on the team. The way it's been built, and Dak Prescott, is kind of limited. They only have one receiver and all that stuff. But he's just going to forge ahead because he just wants to do it his way. And he's, they did have like the best offensive line in the league for a few years there. So I guess that kind of gives him like, oh, I clearly know what I'm doing. But remember, this is the guy that had to be talked out of drafting Johnny Manziel. So I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah, and Clark, I just don't understand the people going, well, Belichick. I mean, Belichick to the Cowboys. What do you think? Blah, blah, blah. And it sounds really sexy and interesting, and I get that. Why in the hell would the Cowboys be like, oh, yeah, we're going to get this guy that wants all the power and wants to make all the decisions and doesn't want to be told what to do? Yeah, we'll hire him. Right?
Yeah.
And from the other side, Belichick's going to be like, you know what? Yeah, I want to work for this team that doesn't really have a very good culture, doesn't really quite understand what it takes to win. And that's, by the way, same thing with the Dolphins. The Dolphins owner is not 100% committed to winning, which is why he has never fired the GM, even though he should have been fired by now. And so that's what it comes down to. They're not 100% committed to winning. Why is Belichick going to take that job? Explain it to me.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of is it's like, well, what's funny to me, people are like, oh, well, they're close to being able to win the Super Bowl. I don't really think that, but I can see how you can talk yourself into that. And Belichick doesn't really have all that much time left to coach. Like, I was looking at it like, Belichick's like him and Pete Carroll are the two oldest coaches in the league. Well, technically they're out of the league right now because they were fired, but, yeah, so I'm looking at it and I'm just like, and also like Belichick Belichick and Pete Carroll, they're like the two oldest coaches ever. Like I think Romeo Crennel might have been a little bit older when he was a coach, like on an interim basis at some point. But yeah, so I'm just kind of like, you really want a coach who's really at the end? Like he's only got like a few years left to be a head coach. So I can see from Belichick's side, like, well, this roster is pretty good. And they could, I could make the playoffs with them, and so then I got a chance. But from the, but still, like all the other stuff, I think matters more, because it just what Eric Mangini was saying, like, why would Belichick give up the power that he has in New England? And if he's going somewhere else, why wouldn't he just want that? I mean, he clearly seems to think that he knows what he's doing, or he just doesn't care, or he just wants to look. I'm at the stage where I just want to do things my way, and that's the end of it. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't, and I'm not a Belichick believer at this point. Okay, no, I'm not saying not casting aspersions on him. I'm not saying he's not good. He's probably the greatest coach of all time. Like, no disrespect, but he's not that anymore,
yeah,
and he hasn't been for the last 3 years.
two things can be
So
true. He can be a bad coach right now, but he could also be the greatest coach of all time.
right, and I don't think he's terrible. I just think I've got to see him go to another team and make it work first before I'm going to believe it. I
Yeah,
don't buy it. I don't buy he's going to go to another team and I'll shift everything and I'm going to make everything's going to be great and blah blah blah. And it's like the guy can't hire offensive coaches. Like, seriously, you know what's going to happen if Belichick takes a job? He's going to have Josh McDaniels be his offensive coordinator. He'll probably bring in Matt Patricia or Joe Judge to be his defensive coordinator, and we're going to be laughing our asses off at how dumb he is. So I just don't understand why Belichick gets this incredible benefit of the doubt when where's the proof? I'm not
yeah,
saying, again, not saying he's not a great coach. And when people say, like Mike Lombardi's talking about this on his podcast, and he's a constant Belichick defender, and I get it. Okay, he worked with him, I understand. But they're like, well, they think Belichick can't draft. How do we win 6 Super Bowls? I'm like, Mike, go to the last 10 years of his drafts and go look at the players. He says it all the time. It's not where you draft them, it's how they play. Okay, 2 Pro Bowlers in 10 years? Like, we're not saying that because it's not true. Like, I just don't. I'm sorry. I don't think Belichick's a shoe in anywhere, and I wouldn't be in a rush to hire him. I just
neither would I.
wouldn't be.
Yeah.
I'm not in a mad rush to hire him. So, but what do you think about? It looks like Harbaugh is going to take an NFL job. That's but we'll see. But I think Harbaugh is the number one candidate in my mind. He'd be the one that I'm after if I'm the Chargers, if I'm the Falcons, if I'm Washington, if I'm
Yeah,
whoever. That's the
definitely.
guy that I'm selling out to get
Yep.
because I know I've seen what that guy does in the NFL. That guy turns it around.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think, yeah, it's probably him, and then, I mean, I guess Vrabel,
yeah, I think so.
because I know people like Ben Johnson, for instance, but he hasn't been a head coach before, so that's an unknown. Maybe he'll be really good. I don't know, but it's just you
Yeah.
don't know. With Vrabel, you know that he can bring toughness to the team, and so that they'll play hard for him. So, and he can establish a culture there, and he can coach defense. So he's probably number 2. But Harbaugh, I mean, Harbaugh had so much success with the 49ers that you just yeah, he's got to be the number 1 candidate.
Yeah, so I would Harbaugh first for me. I agree with you. Vrabel second. I think Pete Carroll's third. I mean,
Okay.
the dude can coach. Yeah, okay. The
Yeah, and let me
quarterback
tell you
wasn't
something.
great.
I just mentioned how old Belichick and Pete Carroll are. Look, Belichick is kind of grumpy and just old and whatever. Pete Carroll, I know he's got all gray hair, but Pete Carroll's he's still got the energy, dude. Like when you see him
Yep.
talk and when you see him, like he's still pumped up and whatever. So, I mean, he looks like he gets up in the morning and goes running for 2 or 3 miles or something like that. So I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to hiring him, even with the age.
Yeah, I don't think the Cowboys are going to fire McCarthy. I Philadelphia. It wouldn't surprise me if they fired Sirianni. I
Yeah,
I Philadelphia doesn't screw around. They don't have a problem firing coaches. They're not worried about, oh, what are we going to do? Philadelphia doesn't play the game like that. They go forward. They don't live in the past. They move on. So it wouldn't surprise me because at the bottom line, even if they keep Sirianni and Clark, they got to change the whole coaching staff.
yeah,
So if you're going to do that, you might as well just get a new head coach.
yep,
And Philadelphia's an attractive job. They're
yeah,
well run. Speaking of drafting, they draft well.
yeah.
they know what they're doing. So yeah, I could see Philadelphia. I don't see Dallas. And yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what happens with these coaches. You got Atlanta open, you got Seattle open, so we'll see we'll see how it goes. Any other coaching thoughts?
No, not at the moment. I don't think so. I mean, the Harbaugh thing, we'll see where we'll just see what happens. I mean, I had more thoughts about Belichick, but I mean, I do find it kind of funny that people seem to think that like Atlanta's a really, really good job or something. It's like they don't have a quarterback. I mean, I know they have some talent. And I think we probably talked about this on the last podcast. I just find it funny to think that Belichick could possibly work in Atlanta because does Belichick like talented players? I just don't like, it just and Atlanta has some talented players. I don't think they want to put up with his old grumpy ass. I
Well, and
mean,
the thing is, Clark, all the stories are coming out from Boston now. Apparently, Belichick didn't want Mac Jones. Apparently,
okay.
that was not his decision. They made him take Mac Jones, and he was bitching about it the whole time. Oh, great. So that's what happens when they draft a player you don't like? You shit on him, and then they turn into garbage? Because the first year with Mac Jones, he was pretty good. And
Yeah.
then the other thing was, Belichick told Kraft, no, Brady's done. He's finished. So they get rid of him, and then Brady wins the Super Bowl. It's like, but Robert Kraft's like, you told me he was done. So it just blows my mind. And they refuse to give them, no, we're not giving Tom Brady $25 million a year. I'm sorry. Tom Brady comes in, wants to take a tremendous discount from what quarterbacks should make. And they're like, no, sorry, can't do it. It's unbelievable. It's just crazy. Anyway. All right. So let's preview the games this weekend. First, right out of the box, Baltimore and Houston. I look at this game. Look, I think Baltimore and San Francisco are in the same boat. If they win their first game after having the bye, I think they're going to the Super Bowl. So, but they've got to avoid this trap that we're going to have now where 2 teams a year are going to get this, where we got the bye, and both San Francisco and Baltimore basically got to take their last regular season game off. They didn't have to worry about it. So, but I think this is one of these games. Lamar Jackson has to win this game.
Yeah.
You can't lose at home to a rookie quarterback. Like, you just can't. It can't happen. So if they lose this game, this is really gonna take a real dump on everybody's belief in Lamar. But I think they will. I don't think Houston's gonna be ready for this. But we'll see. DeMeco Ryans has got his team playing tough, but I think it's going to be really hard in this game for Houston to move the ball consistently. And you play against Lamar. Good luck stopping him. I just
Right.
don't. I don't know how you're. I don't know how you
Yeah.
do it. And
Because people need to understand Houston is way ahead of schedule.
Right.
Like making the playoffs, winning the division, making the playoffs, and winning a playoff game. I mean, that's way ahead of what they thought. I mean, they had a rookie quarterback. They're trying to figure everything out. They need to draft. They need to do some drafting and stuff to improve the roster. Like, yeah, they're way ahead of schedule. So yeah, Baltimore just I think the main thing is the first quarter and a half. Just if you're Baltimore, if you're rusty, just don't let the game get away from you. Eventually settle in, take control of the game like you're supposed to, because you're better than this team, and they should be fine. But yeah, I mean, there is that amount of doubt creeping in where you're like, Lamar just really hasn't played well in the playoffs, so you're just kind of like, but they should win the game.
Yeah, and this is a different Baltimore team. They have a lot more offensive talent than they've ever had before.
Right.
So I expect I expect them to win. I wouldn't be surprised if Houston hangs in there for a half, but I expect Baltimore to win. The game after that, the 49ers and the Packers. Because of the Packers win last week, everybody's going to make, oh, well, look at that. The 49ers came out and they were 10-point favorites or whatever it was. And people were like, oh, that's disrespectful. What are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. So we'll see. I just think, Clark, I mean, they're basically running the same offense.
Yeah.
LaFleur is a Shanahan guy. So the 49ers practice against that offense every day in practice. So I do think the 49ers defense will be ready. And I don't think you're going to light them up the same way that you did before. And I don't think Green Bay's defense, while they looked okay last week against Dallas, I don't believe in them. And I think the 49ers will have their way with them on offense. And the 49ers, it's not necessarily like, even if they're rusty, like Shanahan's so good that, he gets them in such good plays and such good positions that I don't think it's going to matter that much. So
right.
yeah, I like Green Bay's story, but I don't see them beating the 49ers.
Look, the way to beat the 49ers is to get in front of them, because they're a totally different team when they're playing from behind. But it's very difficult to get ahead of them. So I don't know if LaFleur wants to try to do the same thing he did last week, or like if they win the coin toss, take the ball and try to go down and score. So maybe they want to do that. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing. You got to get ahead of them, but not only it can't just be in the first half either. Like, you got to get ahead of them going into the fourth quarter. So yeah, but there's the rust, there's the rust issue. Maybe they come in and they're not sharp, not quite sharp, but I just think same thing with Baltimore. By halftime, I think they'll have it figured out.
Right.
But so we'll see. I think Green Bay has a better chance to beat the 49ers than Houston does to beat Baltimore. But I really don't expect it. All right, so Detroit is playing Tampa. They get the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They are quite the beneficiary of the playoffs this year. Where, I mean, honestly, Clark, either team would have been great for Detroit, Philadelphia or Tampa. But even better with the fact that Tampa, like I just think that game against the Eagles is a complete mirage. Tampa is nowhere near that good. They beat the Panthers the week before 9-0. Like, this
Yeah.
isn't an awesome team that got into the playoffs. And Detroit's got this game at home. That crowd is going to be out of control, just like they were in the last game. Like there's not a whole lot of teams that have a home field advantage, but Detroit actually does. And so I think Detroit wins this game. They got the nerves out in that first game, and I think they'll be ready to go. So I expect the Lions to win. I don't think Tampa's going to stop them. And if Tampa wants to blitz all the time, I just think Detroit's got too many ways to take advantage of that. They have too much speed with the receivers and the running
Yeah.
backs.
I mean, it's basically a matter with Jared Goff. Like, can they get pressure on him? If the Bucks get pressure on him, then they really got a chance to win the game. And then the Lions defense, I guess they can be had, but I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know what happened to the Rams offense in the second half of that game, because it looked like the Rams were kind of going up and down the field, and then they just kind of sputtered out. I don't know. What the deal was with that. I mean, the Lions were sort of the beneficiary of some bad calls that went their way, and against the Rams late in that game. But yeah, I mean, I just don't. You can't really rely on Baker Mayfield to do that again, because I just think some of that we're going nuts about it, and it's so funny. It's like it's like flipped around from when Dak Prescott beat the shit out of the Buccaneers last year. When they were struggling all year, they weren't that good, and like Dak just came in and blew them out. I'm like, oh well, Dak's playing really well, and then they played against the 49ers, and he played like shit. So it could be kind of something similar with that, except this time the Buccaneers are the ones that go into the next round and play like crap. So I would expect the Lions to win, but it's I don't know. It's the NFL playoffs. Sometimes weird stuff happens, so we'll see.
Yeah, I just think I just think Detroit's going to be prepared for what Tampa's going to try to do. And Detroit's defense played pretty well against the
They
Rams.
did, yeah.
So I think if they can keep that up, but yeah, you're right. There's always there's always a shot. I don't think Detroit has an overwhelming advantage like I would say Baltimore against Houston or San Francisco against Green Bay, but
right.
I just I'd be impressed if Tampa went into Detroit and pulled out a win. To the last game, the best game, the Nick Wright Bowl. For those of you that don't know,
there you go.
Nick Wright, a legendary Chiefs fan, defending the Chiefs at all costs and hating the Buffalo Bills at all costs. This is going to be the best game, and I'm glad they made it Sunday night or Sunday evening. I'm really looking forward to it. I think both these teams have plenty of flaws, and both these teams have figured out how to overcome them a lot this season, and sometimes not. But I just think, whatever you're going to say negative about one team, you could basically make the same argument about the other one.
Yeah.
Kansas City's defense is probably a little bit better than Buffalo's is, but I've seen Buffalo play well, man. And again, I think Buffalo's ceiling when Buffalo plays their best is better than Kansas City, but they don't do that often.
Yeah.
It comes and goes. And Kansas City has struggled the whole year on offense. Getting receivers to come through when they need it. So I just think I think this game's a coin flip, and in that case, I'm going to take the home team. I don't think that doesn't mean I think Buffalo's great and Kansas City sucks and whatever. No, Kansas City has some issues, okay, but they're still a good team. Buffalo has some issues. They're still a good team. And we'll see what happens in this game. But I don't like, I hate all the narratives that are being made out of this. Well, Buffalo's got to win. If Buffalo can't beat them now, well, that's it. They're never going to beat them. Blah blah blah. And then like the argument that you make, the argument that, well, it's like Manning and Brady, and Nick Wright's like, no, what are you talking about? Josh Allen hasn't won. Blah blah. It's like, yeah, exactly like Manning and Brady. Okay,
Yeah.
Peyton Manning couldn't beat them for years and years and years and years, and then he finally caught it the right year where they got the game at home in the playoffs and they were able to beat them. Okay, but it took this superhuman effort to do. So just because Buffalo hasn't won anything yet doesn't mean they're not really good. And just because Kansas City went to the Super Bowl last year doesn't mean they're as good as they were last year. So I'll take Buffalo. I don't feel good about it because I don't know how you feel good about either one of these teams.
I have to I was thinking about this earlier this week. I was like, Chiefs Bills part 3, as in the third matchup between these teams in the last few years in the playoffs. And it's basically like, it's kind of funny because after the previous 2 times they played, it was basically like the loser was whining about something. Or actually, I shouldn't. Literally the previous 2 times these teams played, it was in the playoffs in the regular season. So after the game this year, and then there was the game 2 years ago. Yeah,
right.
Sorry, I'm totally confusing myself. So after the playoff game, the one of the greatest games we've ever seen, the 36-33 overtime game, the 13 seconds game. After that, the Bills were whining about the overtime rules, and so then that got changed. Right, this year during the regular season, we saw Patrick Mahomes whining like crazy about a call that was the totally correct call, and saying, "Oh, don't you want the guys out there in the field to go?" So now it's basically like, who's going to be whining and crying after this game? Well, if the Bills win, it'll probably be Nick Wright. If the Bills win, if the Chiefs win, I'm not sure who's going to be whining about what. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I don't think that really had anything resembling a point. But as far as the game goes, it's really hard to pick either one. And I find it funny that like Nick Wright was getting offended that the Bills are favored. I'm like, dude, they're favored by 2.5. When someone's favored by 2.5, if you're picking the game, you have to pick the team who you think's going to win. Okay? Because the odds are that someone's not going to win by 1 point. Like a lot of weird stuff has to happen for you to win by 1 point. So yeah, you got to pick a winner. So and it's like look, and he's trying to make it like sound like the Chiefs, well they've just had a really good year. Your expectations are just all out of whack. It's like, dude, they lost to the Raiders. Okay,
and got smoked.
Yeah, they got smoked.
They didn't just lose; they got killed.
The receivers are dropping passes. Mahomes doesn't trust the offensive tackles, so that's kind of screwing up their offense. Travis Kelce is declining. He's not what he once was. So yeah, they're not the same team. They lost Eric Bieniemy. That may have made a really big deal. I'm not sure. So yeah, I can't really feel good about either one. I'm going to take the Bills. Partly because I think their best at this point right now is better than the Chiefs. And I think they'll come through because the Bills are at home. But the Bills were at home last year and they let Cincinnati walk in there and just kick their ass. Now, granted, I don't think the Chiefs have the capability to do that right now. But
well, yeah, that's by the way, that's another reason why I'm taking Buffalo, because I think Buffalo could screw up. Josh Allen could throw 2 or 3 picks and they could still win because Kansas City can't score.
Yeah.
So whoever gets to 20 points probably wins this game, and that's how it's going to be. So yeah, I just it's again not a huge believer in Buffalo. My argument about Buffalo and Kansas City the whole season is they're the same. Like they're very similar. That's what it is. And it's like I don't like the fact that Josh Allen just gets killed for being reckless. Meanwhile, I've seen Mahomes be plenty reckless. Did you watch the Raiders game? Like the idea that Mahomes is perfect and Josh Allen is not is a joke. So, no offense to either guy. They're both really good. Okay. I would take either one on my team. These criticisms of them are champagne problems. Okay. Well, Josh Allen throws too many picks. Yeah, because Josh Allen's trying to make plays.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't buy.
You know why the Chiefs struggled in the red zone against the Dolphins, right? You know what Nick Wright's been saying? Well, Patrick Mahomes has so much confidence in the defense that he just doesn't want to make a mistake.
Right.
Yeah, that's why. Okay, sure.
Right. The Dolphins offense with 6 starters out. Yeah, and you're
Whatever
having
helps you sleep
trouble.
at night, dude. Whatever.
Right. And the thing is, like, and this is another thing, we should talk about this on another show, but I'm tired of people using these regular season NFL statistics to make their stupid arguments. Okay? The NFL is a small sample size sport, okay? There's not 82 games like there is in basketball, okay? These numbers don't mean jack squat. Okay? Tua led the league in passing yards. Did you see him against Kansas City?
Yeah,
Okay? Tua made the Pro Bowl over Josh Allen. Does that make sense?
yeah,
No, not at all. So these numbers was like, oh well, the Chiefs have the second best defense, and whatever, dude. Like you can rack up, and that was another add on to my point about the quarterback, Clark. There's such a wide gap. Okay, there are 8 to 10 teams in the NFL you can just rack up numbers against.
yep,
If you get to play them, you're going to look really good. Okay, look at Tua's numbers against good teams, against 500 teams. Okay, his completion percentage drops by 10 points. That's not small. 10%?
yeah,
Like, that's insane. So these numbers don't mean a damn thing. Don't tell me about, oh, you can do this. What do you do against good teams? Because that's all that matters. And
yep,
we already saw Buffalo go into Kansas City and beat you,
yep.
and you couldn't score 20 points. So stop trying to tell me how awesome you are. I think it's nice that they're playing this game, but this is basically you guys get to play each other to see who gets to lose in the AFC Championship game. That's what's basically happening here. So good luck.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
anyway,
But I'm
and
I'm excited for the game. I even though I think it's going to be kind of ugly, and I just it's just going to be it's going to be a lot of fun. Whoever wins, because there's just going to be so much overreaction the next few days after
yep.
the game, which
Oh
is
yeah.
going to be fun to watch. It's going to be fun to
Yeah, if
watch.
the
And fun
bit
to listen.
look, if Buffalo loses, McDermott needs to be fired. This team can't win the big one. Josh Allen's a fraud. That's what it's going to be, right? If Mahomes loses, well, I guess he's not really the best quarterback of all time. I don't know. I don't know about this guy. I mean, geez, for God's sakes, Kansas City, can't you get him some help? I mean, what the hell's going
And
on
by the
here?
way, let me make one other point, and I remember this back in the Brady days. Okay, there would be years where the Patriots, you could really tell they were kind of having a down year. I mean, they'd still make the playoffs, and people would be like, "Well, I don't know how you bet against Brady in a playoff game," and I'm like, "That's not analysis." When people are like, "Well, you can't bet against Patrick Mahomes in a playoff game." No, 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 no. You're not analyzing the game. This isn't about who do we think's a really good playoff quarterback just overall in general in a vacuum. This is about what's going to happen in this game. Okay, so some of these people are just like, well, you can't bet against them. It's like, well, dude, are you analyzing the team? Like, you can bet against a really good quarterback in certain situations. Like, why the hell not? I mean, it depends on what's going on this year, right now, how they're playing right now. It's Mahomes could have a bad game against the Bills. He's still great. I'm not like I don't understand why we have to jump off a cliff about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, listen, Tom Brady lost 13 playoff games. I understand that he played 48 of them, so I get that his winning percentage was really good. But I mean, for God's sakes, like Joe Montana lost 7 playoff games. Steve Young lost 8 playoff games. Like you know, guys lose playoff games. It's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean that his career. Listen, and by the way, it doesn't mean I don't believe in the Chiefs. Like going forward, like they've got they got Mahomes on this deal. They're going to keep drafting receivers. There's all kinds of good receivers in the draft every single year. They're going to fix this. Like this is
Yeah,
going to be fixed, and when it does, look out. Like for the next
yeah.
10
I mean,
years, you're in
yeah,
trouble.
they could get if they just like you said, they keep drafting receivers. I mean, look, Rashee Rice is pretty good, you know. And if you could find someone who could be like a true number one receiver, then you have him and the Rashee Rice. Like that could be really good. I mean, they're gonna have to draft somebody to replace Travis Kelce, but yeah, you're right. They are kind of set up though. Like teams can have down years. They can have a year where it's like Mahomes is still really good, and they just
Well,
they've struggled this year.
they might Clark. They're down year. They might be in the AFC Championship game
That's
again.
true, exactly.
So I'm not bashing the Chiefs here. I'm not saying I don't believe in the Chiefs. Like, dude, this is gonna be they're awesome. But this is what it is. They don't win it every year, right? Peyton Manning eventually beat Tom Brady, right?
Yeah.
Like it happened, so but anyway, yeah, looking forward to it. This is going to be an awesome weekend. I think we may get a blowout or two in there, but I think there's going to be the Kansas City Buffalo game is going to be great because I don't think either team's capable of blowing the other one out. So that's
Yeah.
really going to be spectacular. So we'll see everybody within the next week or so. We'll come on to talk about all the games and talk about what we think about what's going on going into the conference championship games, and hopefully next week sometime, Clark, we'll start getting some coaching hires. So
Yeah, that'll be fun.
yep. All right, folks, everybody have a good one. Take care. Good luck. Enjoy the games.